I would love to. Councilmember Keldorf.
Here.
Councilmember Giroux.
Here.
Councilmember Boyles. Mayor Pro Tem Baldino.
Here.
And Mayor Pimentel.
Here. All right, public communications. Do we receive any written public communication?
Indeed, we have. Anya Goldstein would like to speak about what we've got on the agenda.
Both written, so she has written and a card, or just written? Or just wants to test, just wants to give comments, excuse me.
There is a written one of somebody who is planning to show up.
Oh, okay, that's one we received from Langlois, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right, over to you, Ms. Goldstein.
Hi, I am just here to listen today, but because of the format of the meetings where public comments come first, I just wanted to say that I and many members of our community are in favor of affordable housing, housing for people of all income levels, housing along PCH and on the other side of PCH, and in favor of safer streets for pedestrians and bicyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goldstein. All right, any follow-up comment, City Manager?
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Follow-up from the council? All right, moving over to staff presentation. Director Allen, I think you're leading us off.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm excited to be here tonight with this item, or this afternoon with this item. It's been about a half a year in the making since we entered our arrangement with MIG to provide the consulting services to lead us through the comprehensive update of our general plan land use element. And so there is a little bit of a historical background that Laura, who you've met previously during the leadership interviews, will provide in a little bit, so I don't want to steal from that, but it has been a very productive and fast 5 or 6 months with a lot of research and groundwork on identifying our existing conditions, which we'll report out on tonight, as well as community meetings and focus groups. And you'll hear a little bit more about that. And I also want to thank the council for their participation, and we can officially premiere our El Segundo Vision 2050 Century of Innovation, A Future for Possibilities video. And so with that, before I hand it off, I'll have our media team start the video for us.
Turn the lights down.
Hi, I'm Chris Pimentel, Mayor of the City of El Segundo, and today I'm excited to share with you El Segundo Vision 2050. This is our recent initiative to update the city's general plan land use element. The city launched Vision 2050 in March of 2025 to update our land use element. This update will ensure new growth is smart, coordinated, and serves our community's evolving needs, from housing and jobs to parks and infrastructure. Vision 2050 isn't just a plan, it's a community planning process. We need you and invite you to contribute and share your vision for neighborhoods, downtown, industry, and the open spaces you value. The key themes include balancing our industrial and commercial strengths with the community needs, preserving El Segundo's unique small-town character, encouraging smart redevelopment like the new downtown plan and housing strategies, and enhancing mobility, parks, and access to our fabulous amenities. We want this to be your plan, so visit elsegundo.org/Vision 2050 to stay informed, get the project schedule, access documents, and sign up for updates. We want you to attend community meetings, share your ideas online, and help us shape a land use plan that reflects our shared priorities.
El Segundo is the most important 5 square miles economically in all of Southern California. With our concentration of global and market-leading corporations, a thriving cluster of rapidly growing startups, and a diverse mix of industries, including aerospace and defense, biomed, food production, media, technology, and so much more. El Segundo Vision 2050 is our plan to maintain our economic leadership and expand our community's prosperity over the next 25 years. Join us and help us put the goals and policies in place to ensure our economic future.
All of us take pride in El Segundo's small town character, with its quiet and safe neighborhoods, its charming downtown, and its great schools and parks, its wonderful local businesses and quality of life. That's why it's important when we think about our vision and opportunities for El Segundo in 2050 to also safeguard our small town character and what we value the most. Please join us on this effort and tell us what you love the most about El Segundo and want to preserve.
El Segundo is proud to have some of the best parks and recreation facilities in the region.
And over the last few years, we've accomplished so much. We built new soccer fields, east part of town, that are the envy of the South Bay. We have an Olympic-size modern pool facility constructed in partnership with the Wiseburn School District. We're currently expanding the amount of green space at Hilltop Park. We've upgraded the city's public golf course in partnership with Topgolf. In the past few years, we've constructed or upgraded nearly 8 miles of bike routes, bike lanes, and bike paths. We are on track to complete a major renovation of the plunge, which we've completed by early next year. And we're already making substantial progress on a major phase remodel of Recreation Park to be completed over the next 5 years. But what should our next steps be? What other parks, trails, or recreational facilities do you envision for El Segundo? Take your future into your hands and please join in this effort to shape El Segundo's vision for 2050.
It is critical that we hear from you to ensure that El Segundo Vision 2050 reflects our entire community's wishes and aspirations. This update will focus on what matters most for El Segundo, ensuring a healthy and safe environment for our families. There are many ways for you to get involved in the process. You can attend a community workshop, a planning commission, or a city council meeting. You can email the project team at vision2050@elsegundo.org. And you can sign up for email updates and notifications on our website at www.elsegundo.org/vision2050. Please join us and help shape the vision for our community.
We started this effort in March of 2025, and over the coming year, we'll hold multiple community events. We will prepare preliminary concepts and plans, we'll fine-tune and develop a draft use plan, study its environmental impacts, and hold public hearings to formally adopt a new plan by early 2027. All along, we will work closely and in partnership with the entire community. El Segundo has led a century of innovation, and ahead of us lies a future of possibilities. Together, we will build El Segundo's vision for the next 25 years. Vision 2050 is your opportunity to shape El Segundo's future, from housing and commerce to parks and mobility. Please get involved, share your ideas, and join us in creating the next chapter of our city's story. Thank you.
Thank you for indulging our official premiere.
For the record, there was a police drone overhead for the first part of that. I was not pro wrestling style yelling into the microphone for no reason.
Appreciate the time you all took and putting that video together. And our media team, Darnell and our media team have done a fantastic job in working with Paul and Eduardo and Agnes and our team putting that content together. So thank you. That will be probably one of the most informational and informative pieces that we'll put out there. It's on the website now as of yesterday, and we'll be continuing to push that out there and hopefully solicit more and greater participation through this process. I probably couldn't explain what the land use element update is better than we did in the video, and so thank you for helping us there. With that, I'm gonna hand it over to Laura so that we can take advantage of the time before the rest of this evening's activities. But this is meant to be a study session between staff, the consultant, and yourselves, and of course, listen to any public comment if there is enough time for that, and the council has the ability to do that. But also, it's intended to drive the rest of this process. So this is sort of the benchmark of where we establish where we go and how we measure success moving forward as we'll look back to these visions and principles that we'll be looking at today. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over. And again, it's a casual conversation, and so you'll find myself and Paul and Eduardo and Agnes may step in as well as Daryl if you have any input, or Mark. And so this is a casual conversation, but we're really looking forward to hearing some of your feedback. So, Laura, please.
Thanks, Michael. Laura Stetson from MIG, and thank you for coming in early this evening to go through this important study session. I wanted to first note that I think if you ever want to give up your day jobs, you all have a future in Hollywood. That was an extraordinarily well put together and spoken presentation. I think this is probably one of the first general plan updates that I've been involved with that a video like this has been put together. So I hope it inspires people to come and participate in future events. If you have questions as we move through things, please don't hesitate to ask. We do have some discussion questions at the end because we have some takeaways that we'd like to make sure that we take away this evening. And more than anything, I think keep in mind as we're going through the presentation this evening and the next step, which is the land use alternatives process, is that this is a priority exercise. It's a finite boundary on the city, finite land use availability. And so when we're asking people what they see for the future of El Segundo, you can't have it all because it won't all fit sometimes. And so a lot of what we've asked the folks when we've been in our community workshop or through the unscientific, not statistically valid questionnaire that we did, we've asked people to prioritize because that's what's important to do as you're going through a process like this. So this afternoon, we'll give you an update of how we've gone out and spoken with the community, what we've learned from our background research, primarily the market research, what the public has said, what we've heard from your technical advisory committee and your planning commission. We are asking you to weigh in on the preliminary vision and guiding principles that have been drafted and to not wordsmith it, but look at the top level and say, yes, these are the key guiding principles that should be guiding this general plan update, and then to show you what the next steps are in the process. So as we've said, we want information, your feedback on the guiding principles. We're going to share with you some focus areas and to ask whether or not we are highlighting the right places where change might occur, if there are places that you think should be taken off the table, or that there are areas that have been missed. And then also, what opportunities and challenges do you want to make sure are addressed as part of this effort? And we've asked you some of these questions when we did the one-on-one interviews a number of months ago, but this is the first chance, the opportunity for you all to talk about this together and to have the inputs of what the public has said. The outreach that has occurred to date were the city leadership interviews back in the spring of this year, followed up with focus groups on mid-August. We met with groups of folks that included developers, major employers, including Chevron and some of the other major employers in the region. We had roundtable discussions with them via Zoom, which were highly informative. They really spoke their minds, we felt, and shared with us what they felt was needed in El Segundo looking forward. And so we got a lot of great information out of those focus groups. And these are all summarized in the engagement summary that you can read if you'd like to. In August, early August, we had a community workshop over at the library. We had about 70 people show up. It had really fun conversations with folks. I think they had a good time. And they interacted with some boards that were there, question boards, most of which was replicated on the questionnaire. So if people didn't have the opportunity to attend the meeting in August, they would be able to have a similar experience in working with the questionnaire. And that ran for about a month, concluding in September 17th. I do want to say for both the workshop and the questionnaire, if you were to say, okay, if that had been a representative shot of what El Segundo looks like demographically, it certainly wasn't. It skewed towards homeowners, it skewed towards older people, and so that's clearly not the whole demographic of the community. So keep that in mind as you're looking at the responses, is that we haven't talked to everybody yet, and your staff was fantastic in getting the word out. So it's not for want of trying that more people didn't get involved, and so that's telling us for the next phase, we really need to dig deep and find other ways to get people involved who haven't had a chance up to this point. Existing conditions. We have, as part of the team, an economist, Kaiser Marston Associates, as well as Farron Piers, our traffic engineer, who are looking at data that they've put together to help drive some of the policy choices that need to be pursued as part of the land use element. And they have put their materials together in a background report, which was summarized in something called a story map. How many of you had a chance? Well, I won't ask for a show of hands. If you have had the opportunity to look at the story map online, it's something that's easy to read through. It's a high-level summary of the background analysis that has been done. If you're interested in the details, you may certainly look at the market analysis that Kaiser Marston did or the mobility report. But if you want the Reader's Digest version, I would direct you to look at the story map. What we've learned from the background research, let's talk first about housing. And I think most of what I'm going to say about housing is things that you already know, that are it's very clear from your position of leadership here, is that you know what's going on in the housing market and what the constituency is in El Segundo. owner versus renter, you've got 57% renters, 43% owners, which might be indicative of the fact that there is not as much housing stock for sale for home ownership as there might be. Many homes or households are overpaying for housing, and that is a metric established by the federal government. If a household is spending more than 30% of household income on housing costs, you are considered housing burdened. And as that top piece of the slide shows you, 29% of owner households are burdened, and 33% of renter households.
Excuse me. How does that compare to the region? Do you have?
I don't have those statistics.
Because I
at hand.
imagine we're either median or low.
You would probably be below what the what it is for countywide of LA. Demographic, fairly young community, or community with people with children of childbearing age who might have children in the schools from 25 to 44. Your senior population at 13% represents people who certainly contribute to the community, but might be looking to stay in the community and downsize their homes. That's what we find out when we talk in many communities, that people have said, I'd love to stay in my community, I just don't need this big house anymore, and please make sure that there are options for housing as I look to downsize. The market conditions in the city. Kaiser Marston looked at, and I'm going to run through them, your retail, industrial, commercial markets.
Can we turn that light out in the middle? There's a giant glare here. We can't see the middle of the screen. No, turn that, we can't see the middle of the screen from here. So can you go back to that preceding graph on population, please? Because we can't see it with that. Yeah, that light. From up here, we can't see the screen.
And I think it's the same over here. There we go.
Oh, much better.
Does that help, Mayor? And when you're looking at that 2015 projection, those are projections from the Southern California Association of Governments towards 2050. So up through 2025 is what we can report as fact.
Wait, you think at 2020, right now, you think our population is under 17,000?
It is being reported as just under, just around 17,000. 2025, it was shown as it shows a decline from 2020 to 2025.
Very well.
The city is obviously an employment hub. You have about 70,000 people who come to work in El Segundo every day. And one metric that is frequently used when you're trying to balance jobs and housing is what is the jobs to housing ratio. Not most cities are below one job for every working age adult in the community. Your jobs to housing ratio is probably one of the highest in the county at 2.6 jobs per 0.4
Where did you get 70,000? Our most recent internal survey has it at about 55.
That was something that was in probably one of the reports that Kaiser Marston reported to us.
Very well.
I think some of the sources, if we want, because Kaiser Marston will be at future meetings, so we can sort of start the inventory of, there's some detailed questions about sourcing. They use proprietary data that we're familiar with, but I think some of those questions we can start to tabulate.
Okay, because that ratio is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of retail, the retail rents in the city are higher relative to the County of Los Angeles. Because you've got a captive market during the day, they are probably shopping and eating at many of the fine establishments in El Segundo, and that allows the retail landlords to command higher rents. And your vacancy rate for retail is lower generally than the county rate. Office. We all know what the office market is like these days, and it was declining prior to COVID. The office market has really changed with the advent of people figuring out they can work from home much more easily, or it's fun to do that. And so the office vacancy rate is just about on par with the county vacancy rate. And a lot of it depends on, the type of office, your Class A versus Class B, Class C. And my notes say that it's actually higher in the Class C. I don't have that exact number in front of me, but it's because if people are looking, if you're seeing movement in the higher rent, it's because folks are looking to downsize, or they're moving from, say, downtown LA to El Segundo or to other locations. So there is movement, but it's not a real growth in the office space. Industrial, very strong industrial market. The rents that are commanded here are twice what they are in Los Angeles County as a whole, higher than the Beach Cities submarket. Very strong demand for for industrial, and you can see with the vacancy rate that if you had more, it would probably get filled up. And this is a range of industrial type, from manufacturing to the R&D that you see in the Smoky Hollow area.
I will say that from last week when we were surveying people moving in, they're being quoted at north of $4 a square foot currently in industrial.
As opposed to
As opposed to 3.
to 3. So it keeps going up. The projected hotel demand, and this is observed in the LAX hospitality submarket, which is not just El Segundo, but the city of LA itself, Inglewood and Culver City. There is a continued strong projected demand for hotel rooms. Back to housing. The work that Kaiser Marston did to assess the demand for housing and the shortage is not based on the housing element number, your regional housing needs assessment number, but rather other factors, and I couldn't exactly tell you what those are right now, but we can get that information to you if you like. But I think, again, this is not a surprise that there is a demand for housing that is outstripping the existing housing supply, even though the city does have quite a few units in the pipeline. Meaning there are some applications that are still not approved, but they are active applications. And so there is interest in building housing. There's an even greater demand for as much housing as the market could bear. Any questions on this?
Yeah, that last slide. So the 600 units, that does not take into consideration projects that are approved already, like PCC with 200 and whatever units. Okay, but the 263, those are approved, entitled, or no?
That's inclusive of PCC, which is entitled,
Okay.
and projects that are in the pipeline but not yet entitled.
thank you.
So you can't tell us how that 600-plus needed units came to be determined?
Not this evening.
Is it the comparison between people who live here versus our workplace population? Because I know that's in the report. They're saying, oh, there's more employees than we have.
I did look into this, like, anticipating this question. That is a factor, as well as a comparison of home sale prices as well as rental rates compared within the region, based on just a demand modeling, based on demand of what would satisfy, what would accomplish that price, maybe coming down to, so what type of inventory or volume would help satisfy that demand in order to bring the prices to more comparable regional pricing.
Comparable regional pricing, meaning the South Bay of Los Angeles.
I'd have to get back to them about
Okay.
what the sub-area or county or, because all those are nuanced differences that, do make a difference in
No,
what
I
this
get
number
it.
actually represents.
I get it. My concern is using data based upon the number of employees versus the number of homes, because that's how the city is designed and laid out. This does not be a shock to anybody that we have more employees than we have residences. So if that's the calculation that's trying to spit out this number, I'd like to see the math next time we talk about it, that's all.
Absolutely.
Another point on that is, like, there's probably no consideration for our neighbor. Manhattan Beach just approved, 1,300 homes overlay on Rosecrans on our border. More than that, Alex is saying 15%, with I think 13% affordable or something. So that will obviously provide supply for some of our residents.
Those would certainly have impacts. We did not have them look at units in the pipeline in adjacent jurisdictions.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
But it would certainly have an impact on demand. And just while I had the mic, some of the other data sources are CoStar as well as EDD. So some of this information is coming from a combination of CoStar and EDD at a state level.
Employment
As it
development-
relates to employment numbers, yeah,
Employment
sorry.
Development Department.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason I'm bringing up the topic of mobility or circulation, this project does not involve an update to the circulation element. However, the land use choices that are made as part of the land use element update are going to affect and influence what circulation improvements might be needed in an area. For example, this is just a for example. If there is a desire to allow for housing in parts of Smoky Hollow, the pedestrian environment would need to be improved, probably. And so we want those calculations and those considerations to go into some of the land use alternatives that we're examining, because those are real investments that the city would be required to make. And so you need to look at the policy and financial implications of particular land uses as well, as they affect circulation in particular. And
Mark, do you know, did the state law pass, there was one of the laws that was waiting for the governor's signature that halves the level of impact fee you can make on mobility for housing projects if you're within, I don't remember, what is a half mile of a something?
I don't know, we're going through like the next few days here, all the things.
Yeah, but for
signing.
multifamily, the impact fee on vehicle traffic, I think is less by half.
I don't know.
I assume it got signed.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think there's anything he's not signing.
Oh, that's not true.
Well, on the housing front.
No.
It wasn't a criticism.
so this is just for you to keep in mind as we're talking about land use, the fact that you've got different characteristics of the roadway system, depending on what part of the city that you're in. Much more grid-like pattern in the historically residential area of El Segundo. Smoky Hollow, as I mentioned, it was built up as an industrial area and might not have the infrastructure in place that today would be conducive. And then on the east side of El Segundo, big roads, railway connections, not continuous roadways that go through. I think Douglas is probably only the only north-south on that number 2, the southeast El Segundo quadrant area. So those are things that we're going to be thinking about as we're looking at land use alternatives as well. What has the public said? Through the leadership interviews that were done, and at the community workshop and at the focus groups, there were a lot of different opinions, ideas that were brought forward. And at this point, we're just saying, okay, what were some of the key takeaways from all of this input that was given? I think, and I mentioned that the focus groups that we did, where we talked to numerous business owners, real estate professionals, they gave a very different perspective, certainly than residents would, because they are here looking out for different things than residents are. One thing that they kept saying is, we've got a lot of people who are commuting in, obviously, because there are only so much housing in the region, and people are commuting in. And sometimes that plays into their ability to attract folks to work at their places of business. But they also, almost to a person, mentioned how much they love being in El Segundo as business, and they want to stay here, they want to grow here. You've got, great things, Fortune 500 companies. I saw that Genesis is now coming into the community as well. So such an attraction, and the business community recognizes the synergies that they have with each other, and really how it spotlights El Segundo as a great place to have a business. So I didn't want that to be lost in a lot of the conversations that we had with folks. I've already mentioned the workshop and the questionnaire. We had about 850 people respond to the questionnaire, which for a community of this size on a project like this is a pretty darn good rate. Although, as I mentioned, it's not statistically valid by any stretch of the imagination, and doesn't reflect what the demographics that we showed you earlier on the slides. Some of the key themes at just a very high level talked about growth and character of the community. We kept hearing, we love our small town charm. Don't do anything to disrupt the small town charm in El Segundo. With regard to housing, people brought up housing, the need for affordable housing, the need for different types of housing, both rental and for ownership. There were, some people brought up, okay, where else in the community can we put housing where it hasn't traditionally been? No real consensus on that at all, just a lot of discussions of where else housing might be. In the economy, the business group said flexibility. Please allow for flexibility to allow us to grow, for the new types of businesses to come in that would like to. All sides ask questions about infrastructure, that if the community does grow, is the infrastructure in place, not just the roadways, but the stuff that's under the streets to support level of growth, water pipes, sewer pipes, all those things, telecommunications network. People express the desire for not just more park space, but improved park space, as you're doing right now downtown, but also other public realm improvements, creating connections throughout the community, and just making it keeping it a nice green place. And then lastly, several folks have said, please make sure that all voices are being heard as part of this effort, that as part of the phase 2 and phase 3 of engagement, that we do all that we can to dig down very deep into the community to listen to all of those voices. I'm not going to read everything that's on this slide. We can provide the presentation to you later, but the different groups that we talked to did have different priorities, and I said at the beginning that this is a priority exercise, a priority program to update the land use element. But you can see here that both through the city leadership interviews and also in talking to the community, the preservation of the existing neighborhoods is key. Having good redevelopment strategies, strong economic base stability, and balancing growth and community character. So that is a scale that we're going to have to make level as we go through this process. We met with the Technical Advisory Committee earlier this month. Some of the key messages that they brought forward was to make sure that the vision is very clear, and we're going to show you the draft vision in just a minute. They emphasize the continued outreach. They emphasize preserving space for startups in the community, so not just the Fortune 500 businesses, but making sure that there's space for anybody who wants to have an entry into El Segundo. They asked that, in particular, that we look at the Civic Center area, which I think is addressed in your downtown plan, but maybe do a little bit deeper dive on that and what could be the future of the Civic Center area, as well as they've asked the question, what's the long-term use of the entire Chevron property over time and properties off of Vista Del Mar. So they gave some very specific direction on some very specific sites that they wanted us to consider as part of the land use element alternatives process. We met with the Planning Commission about a week ago. They asked about the financial implications of additional housing and to ensure that those are in the calculus as part of the fiscal impact analysis. They wanted to make sure that impacts on both school districts would be analyzed if there is the opportunity for kids to go to Weisburn, are there impacts there as well? And they did specifically bring up housing in Smoky Hollow. They wanted that investigated as an area to look at.
And if I could just touch upon a couple of those, I'm on TAC, and I think, you can have 15 people in a room and the takeaways are going to be a little bit different. Some variations on this. I think what I heard is preserving space for startups, but really a focus on when startups move to the next level. So, you're not a massive Fortune 500 company, you're not a 5-person startup, but really making sure that you capture that intermediate area. And then properties off of Vista Del Mar, I don't know. I can't really recall what the focus of that was, but I do think there was a consensus to not really address Chevron as part of this analysis. So if there was a different take on it, I'm totally open to that.
Yeah, just additional context. It was more in the feedback was more along the lines of looking at other areas that maybe we traditionally have not, and asking, do we need to project what happens here in the next 25 years, or at least identify that at some point in the next 25 years, we do need to come up with a game plan. And so those were sort of examples. We did talk about them very, very lightly and briefly, but they were sort of examples of areas that the city traditionally has not taken a long-term land use approach because they've existed for the last, 100 years for the most part. But do we need to sort of start to ruminate or project that maybe in the next 15, 20, 25 years we'll probably need to, and what does that game plan look like? Or where do we even start, if at all? That's sort of where it came up.
I think one of the problems that you face when we do this, or challenges that you face when you do this, is that you're capturing all different potential solutions, but there are some things that are just simply not something that we can do as a city. And I just want to make sure that some of that is being communicated to the individuals that are bringing it up, because if we have 20 ideas, but the reality is we really probably only going to be able to focus on 5 that we can actually potentially achieve, I believe that our time would be best spent going after those 5 than just having a bunch of bullet points up there that we're not able to handle.
Yeah, and I
Like
think,
Chevron's a private property. There's not, we can't force another private entity to do something. So I understand that's, obviously Chevron's a big part of the city, and people always look at that because it has a massive amount of land, but what can we actually realistically take a look at as potential solutions?
yeah, and I think that's the benefit of this exercise, is the intent is to narrow that universe and be able to answer those questions. Do we even want to begin to entertain what we can or can't do? That's hopefully what we'll get out of today's conversation.
And interestingly, when we were doing the focus groups, a representative from Chevron was there, and they said, "Come talk to us anytime. We're happy to participate in this exercise if you have additional questions for us." And so I think the thinking here was, do they have a 50-year plan? And is there anything in that 50-year plan that should be reflected in the city's plan for the next years? Just even in terms of policy points, not planning land use, but recognizing if Chevron says, we're just planning to stay here as long as we possibly can, great. That's a given, and that's something that would not be raised with the public as a land use alternative. So based on all of the input to date, the team has put together a preliminary vision, and if you could bear with me just a minute, I'm going to read it for the benefit of anybody watching who on YouTube who might not be able to see it, but the vision is, and this is a picture of the city in 2050 and beyond, a city built on a century of innovation with vibrant neighborhoods, thriving businesses, balanced growth, and inclusive opportunities, preserving our small town character for generations to come. And this vision is encapsulating what we've heard from Keep Our Small Town, but let us continue to be the hub of innovation that we've been. So it's stay the course. We've been doing great, but if we need to tweak around the edges, I think that might be the way to encapsulate that vision. So we're going to ask if there's anything that looks out of whack in that vision to you. As I said, we're not here to wordsmith anything today, but is there anything missing? And the guiding principles that support that vision you can see on the balance of that slide, and we're prepared to go through them. If you'd like to focus on any of these guiding principles about preserving character, expanding housing choices, economic innovation, enhanced public spaces, making sure that we plan for infrastructure and mobility, promote environmental stewardship, ensure fiscal sustainability, and engage the entire community. So if anybody first wants to comment on anything in the vision statement, we'd really like that feedback.
I think your statement is fine. It's just that these words are so vague and broad. What do you mean enhance public spaces?
Enhanced public spaces would mean to make sure that parks meet the needs of current generations and future generations. So enhancing park space, median space, green space in the community, anything that people have access to. And there would be goals and policies in the land use element that get down to the detail on that in implementation. But the vision is at a fairly high level. But if there's anything in particular that concerns you or you think needs to be better defined
I
in the
think
element?
one stands out to me, which is fostering economic innovation. I assume that means solidifying our base in business because 98% of the city's revenue comes from business directly, less than 2% from residents' property taxes. So is that what that means? I don't see anything in there about, I think it's risky to assume that we maintain our competitive advantage when it comes to being the place for innovation. It's been somewhat happenstance, organic. We have companies like SpaceX starting here 20 years ago because we had this base of aerospace and defense and this density of intellectual capital. And then we have second and third order effect companies starting, SpaceX alum. We can't take that for granted. And so I think there needs to be more thought given to what is our policy to make sure that we don't have to raise taxes. We don't have to do these things for our residents. We have been so fortunate and blessed because, again, 98% of our revenue comes from business. And that is different than all other 87 cities in LA County, with the exception of maybe City of Industry and Vernon. So what are we going to do to maintain that diversity, that strength, resilience of the business community? So that to me is lacking a little bit. So foster economic innovation, but to me there's like there's like 8 pillars here or whatever, but without the business community, we are screwed as a city, honestly.
Do you see that coming in later? I mean, maybe it's the order of it, but the ensure fiscal sustainability.
It's more about like directly, I think we have to be more intentional about what are we actually building in the business community and how do we support them, because the business community already in California has tremendous headwinds when it comes to wage and hour laws, when it comes to regulatory compliance. Every other aspect of doing business is challenging the state. Where are you up against that? The one thing we have going for us is our people. But we also have examples of our companies moving out of El Segundo to different states. So what can we do to fight against everything at the state level that's going against the business community? There has to be some definition in my mind about that, because that's what I hear from fellow entrepreneurs. That's what I see as a business owner. That is what's happening. So how do we offset that?
And what I'm hearing is that we can, let's look harder at that guiding principle and not say so much foster economic innovation, but focus on retaining, I don't have the words right now, but recognizing the importance of the businesses in this community. Yeah.
My concern is that it's so vague. You could be talking about any city. This has not been tailored to the realities of what El Segundo is, the way it's laid out, the way our economy works, the way our taxes are, and the importance of having a robust business side to support all the services we're able to give to the residents. It's a balance unlike anything you'll see in Los Angeles, which is mostly all kind of spread out. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I'll wait to see more of the presentation, but this slide, you'd be talking about Torrance. You know, I'd like to see something with all the input and outreach you've done that speaks more about, here's what El Segundo does really well. Here's what we excel in. Here are the benefits we have because of, you know, Chevron, because of Boeing. Here are the characteristics of a small town that are important and we think should be preserved. You know, when it's just so general, it's kind of like, what are we talking about?
Good feedback. Paul, I'm doing and Michael, a time check here because I did want to get to the questions. And I'm thinking maybe rather than going in detail through the guiding principles, we can go to the focus areas.
You got 43 minutes.
43, okay. We're good then. I didn't know if you were at a 5 o'clock or 5:15 target date.
My time thingy says 5:30.
Okay.
But I hate vision statements, so you can take all the time you want.
The guiding principles are designed to support the vision and go a little bit deeper into the things that are foremostly important in El Segundo so that the goals and policies and the land use plan will drift down from here. And so if we could spend time going through these, there's one or two that I already know that we're gonna need to do some major rehaul on, just to make sure that they're more reflective of precisely what El Segundo is. First, preserving the small town community. That's something that we've heard from the residential base. Are there any on here that you think don't resonate or that really need some major rework to focus more on the policy direction, the guiding principles that you'd like to be built into this plan? Yeah, there's 4 here and 4 on the next.
Yeah, let's take a look at the next 4. And I don't know if that economic development one, Councilmember Boyles, starts to get to the statements that you made about the importance of the business community as an economic foundation for El Segundo. So if there's a particular topic somebody would like to tackle.
I think maybe what we're struggling with a little bit is what Mayor Pro Temp was talking about. There seems to be a lot of big words and a lot of buzzwords, but I don't even know what we're trying to get to on some of this. I mean, I understand the topics, but the way it's worded, I'm sorry, Ryan, to use your same words, but it just seems very general. And I think that's where we're struggling. I think we all want to make sure that we're making the right plan going forward, that we're not struggling with the need for that. I think we're struggling with what we're seeing. They're really well worded, but I'm not sure how to react to any of them.
Let's back up then, and let's put aside the guiding principles. And if each of you were to think about 1 or 2 of the top things that you would tell somebody about what is guiding the decision-making that you're doing from a land use perspective when you sit on the council, what are those things that you think need to be communicated to the public?
Well, the reality of that is that our job essentially to make any of this happen is to get out of the way, right? That's really what it is. It's about how do we get out of the way and allow the creative people to come in here and give us ideas and concepts on how to do this. That's the truth of the matter. Because in the end, we set policy. We don't build buildings necessarily. We set the policy for it. So I think that's part of it. I'll leave it to the rest of my colleagues for the rest of it.
My feeling is that over the time served in the Planning Commission, I kind of got to see the evolution of Smoky Hollow from medium manufacturing, light industrial, to segue into this tech space and this startup area, to now you can't even get a place over there. The real estate is too compacted. It's very desirable. And then if you look at that growth, we finally did a revised Smoky Hollow plan. And I hope that this general plan would kind of look back at, where has El Segundo been the last 10, 15 years? What are the demands that have been made through the CUP process, through variations where companies have said, hey, I want to do this, but I can't because of this, this, and this. I hope through this exercise, we can focus on the corporate office side of things that has taken a hit since COVID, has had struggles of getting its occupancy up, and learn our lessons from what happened at Smoky Hollow as far as widening land use, getting out of the way, as he said, of what people think the best use of a building is or what type of business they even want to run there, and apply that to the corporate office area and give it a shot in the arm so that it can open up and thrive and change in ways that we can't even think of right now. And this presentation, of course, people who live here are going to want better parks. They're going to want more affordable housing, businesses, I get it, you're gonna want affordable housing for the folks that work here, but the reality of El Segundo is that there is a balance, and this balance has been working very good from a tax basis. It allows us to offer services and amenities that a lot of cities cannot afford to offer. But I think just kind of treating us like any other city or just making a general statement doesn't help us focus on what we've already learned as a city through the various applications that we've processed, the changes that we've seen. And I think if we are more reflective on what's already been approved and what's already changed, we can kind of point in a direction of where things need to go. I hope this is making sense, because I want to appreciate the time you've taken to reach out and get these comments. And we love getting public feedback and public input. I would just like all that information utilized to focus on the El Segundo specific realities that we're living with. The good, the bad, the things where we need improvements on, and the things that have, worked out well and increased occupancy. And so maybe that level of detail is coming later, and I should just sit back and enjoy the rest of the PowerPoint presentation, and I can get into it. But you're asking very big questions, but only providing very general guideposts of how we get to where we think El Segundo needs to be. And so I think there's just a level of, being intentional, being aware of how we got to where we are today, and being reflective of what have we done well, what can we do better, and how can we make this into a type of land use that allows the city to kind of organically continue to flourish and grow and prosper.
With regard to the detail, you're right. The planning is an iterative and a winnowing process. We're not at the fine winnowing yet, and we're looking for the general direction. I'm hearing it from you. I'm hearing we've got this this economic base that we want to do all that we can to keep it that way and to keep it flexible, to keep businesses here. So absolutely. I'm glad that you brought up the Smoky Hollow example. In redoing the specific plan and amending the specific plan, there was a very intentional effort on the city's part to change the development standards to the floor area ratio to do things at a detailed level that would allow larger buildings to be built, to relax some parking standards because parking has been such a constraint. The general plan's not going to get into that level of detail, but it needs to set the foundation for that detail to be put in place through your zoning code. So if, for example, the policy direction is, as you've indicated, let's look at the corporate office space and how those areas might be repurposed. Today, your land use plan might say, guess what? All you can do here is office. That's where we need to look and say, no, it needs to be more than office because there's not the flexibility to allow something else to happen here. And so that's what we're asking today is, and we've got a couple areas that we've shown that might be focus areas, but we're asking for what are those things that you want this effort to focus on so that we can communicate back to the public as we're going through the land use alternatives. How can the city continue to thrive and move forward? So I apologize that we don't have the level of detail yet on this that you're looking for. We're at a higher level right now. What are those key things that you need to make sure are carried forward, things to avoid as part of land use? Somebody mentioned maybe Chevron's off the table. We don't even think about Chevron. We go talk to them and say, we've got this plan, keep us as we are in your general plan, industrial, that's all we intend to do. And so that's the type of thinking that goes into this effort at this point is where are these big picture things that we need to look at before we get into the detail.
All right, so if I'm looking just to get through this, right? So when I look at your first one on land use and community design, I don't know what to do on that one, right? Because that won't be solved in some of the next ones. So on the housing piece, that is a major piece of it. That's kind of what we're just talking about right now. What kind of options are there on the table? What things can we look at for land use and policy changes that we can make, right? That makes sense. Creating welcoming parks, plazas, community facilities, that's something we can affect. That's within our purview to be able to do that. Climate resilience and integrated green spaces, our green practices. Okay, I don't know how high on the level of you know, priority that is, but okay, that is something we can actually do. Like we can actually form policy around that. So, but on the first one, on the upper left, I just don't know what it means in comparison to anything else.
And
It's
that
just innocuous.
And that would really start to look at the existing neighborhoods that are there today. Don't do anything to inject density in the areas that.
Okay, is that what we're saying then? Don't overpopulate what we already have? Then let's just say that.
Perfect.
Okay, because what's happening is we're glossing over what the words really are supposed to mean, which means we have a density issue in certain parts of the city, so let's kind of look elsewhere to see how we can grow. Great, then let's just put that in there, rather than having to try to dissect this for 20 minutes on what the words mean. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that, for example, that might be worded as preserve the character of single-family neighborhoods, because that's what we were hearing.
Okay, then I think that's what we should write then. If that's what if that's what your feedback was, that's what it should say, right?
Well, I think these are principles, right? So preserving small town character doesn't mean no multifamily, right? It means that can do everything from building shape and form and the number of R3s you have. Like people always get blown away on the west side by how many multifamilies there are in the 300 and 400 block, right? They extend all the way in there harmlessly. So I think that we sort of get what you're talking about because we all sit up here, and I think if we keep it as a principle. That like, look, we like the way our neighborhoods feel, but without getting too precise in direction just yet, because I have a feeling we're at about 9 more meetings of these where we can drill down pretty specifically. You know, like I would throw in for a piece of color that Chevron doesn't necessarily mean everything that Chevron owns on the refinery property now, but things that Chevron owns outside the property line of the refinery itself or their deed restricted properties. That's of value to us to know. If we see a deed restriction on a property that doesn't allow housing on it, that may no longer be valid because of the way the refinery operates or the way that the topography works, like that to be of interest to us. So, like there's certainly spots at Smoky Hollow that maybe the shape of the buildings and where they actually do the refining process might lend themselves to housing in a way they would not have 40 years ago. So I'd be interested in that, but I think that as a principle, I think I get what you're saying.
I would add to the conversation that the way that this was described to me when we first saw an even longer presentation is that this really is intended as the framework, right? And the feedback was, well, of course, those are the guiding principles that everybody would want to live by. What an idyllic little place to live. And I do think that that is a match with how people feel about living here. My understanding was the intent was that this was very high level and that there would be several subsequent opportunities to really get in and define, much like our overarching city plan is with a vision, a goal, an objective, that we're gonna have, 5 bullet points and then 3 subpoints to each of these. I think what you're hearing is that we're anxious to get there and a little bit concerned about the timeline that we have to do it, right? Because we're almost 5 months in, how many months in? 5 months in on an 18-month plan. And so it's just the concern for me is the speed to get to the meat of it.
One other point, you mentioned the Planning Commission wanted to look at more housing in Smoky Hollow. And my recollection is when we did the Smoky Hollow plan, the people in Smoky Hollow did not want more housing. So I think we should now reach out to that group because what the Planning Commission wants may not be what the folks who are operating there right now think is best. So I'll just throw that out there as more homework to do, I suppose.
There's very few things that are predictable in life, but people who have housing somewhere are super comfortable not having more housing next to them. I mean, that's the Robert Frost moment of our show. I think we can all agree that we don't need any more doggy daycares and no more storage, right? Because can we just agree on that? So you can cut to that part of the end. The choose your own adventure, that's on the ending slide. No more doggy daycares, no more storage.
We can address storage pretty easily. I'm not sure about the doggy daycare.
I can. No more doggy daycares.
We will rework the guiding principles, but thank you, Councilmember Keldorf to indicate that, yes, the guiding principles are at a higher level. It sounds like we probably want to talk with staff about coming back to the council sooner rather than later on the detail of this. Because you're into the numbers, you're into the weeds on these already. Given
We're
that,
super helpful.
what I'd like to do then is I want to jump ahead to focus areas, because the land use element is about land use change and land use preservation and putting those policies in place that will achieve what you're looking to do in terms of business growth, business retention, housing people. Those are, the 2 or 3 key things that the land use element will do. There are parts of El Segundo that have been in play and in discussion and came up again through the engagement as to areas that you might want to, or you, not you, the council, but the community might want to take a look at where change might occur, where it might be palatable. In your housing element, there are areas where an overlay was applied to consider in the future maybe more dense housing. I would say that that future is now. I think when you were putting the housing element together, it was couched in terms of, well, let's do this for our next housing element cycle. Well, that's going to be 2029. It's kind of just around the corner, and it's going to build off of what the land use element sets forth. And so the things that you see in there in orange are areas where there have been prior discussions about intensifying or allowing greater intensity housing. That's part of the discussion, should that continue to move forward. We mentioned Smoky Hollow already, a focus area. What might be reimagined for an even greater Smoky Hollow? Downtown, you recently put together your downtown specific plan update. People have asked the question through the engagement process, is there capacity for housing downtown? Is there capacity to go maybe a little bit higher in some areas? Is that going to change the character of downtown?
We already addressed those elements though, right? Do we have to go back for this? I mean, we litigated that part already about housing on top of what heights for the downtown specific plan. I don't think we necessarily need to touch that part because we fought that battle already.
Yeah, that was pretty recent. We did the downtown plan and talked about the canyonization and how.
The 25-foot setbacks,
Right.
it's like we're okay with that.
I would say the one thing that we did not talk about was housing in Smoky Hollow. It's still not prohibited or not permitted. And
No, I'm okay having that conversation, 100%.
I mean, part of it is just making sure also that there's a symbiotic relationship between the downtown specific plan and the land use.
No,
element.
I get it, yeah, but just like we can, those allocations though we're already comfortable with, and we're already comfortable with the heights, like we've done that piece. And does anyone have any changed feelings about any of the orange pieces where we have overlays?
I do. I mean,
We're
talking about 2050. So we're saying by 2050, we don't want to allow any potential increased density downtown. I think if you asked our business community, they would welcome that.
Well, we do though. It's in the downtown plan. You can
No,
go
I'm
up
talking
and-
about beyond the height limitations that's in play now. Like one of the ideas that came before council and was killed because the Surplus Land Act was reimagining this very plaza. But based on what we're saying right now, if someone wanted to come in, the only way to make it pencil is to go higher in nature and do retail restaurant down below, do office, and do housing, and potentially even a hotel. But based on the way our downtown specific plan is currently set up, they would be precluded from doing that.
I agree on the east side of the street. You can get a little higher on the west side, but we just, I don't want to bring up Acacia Park, but we already fought this battle. I know I can bring up Acacia Park to litigate it over and over.
I'm just saying we are engaging, the whole exercise here is to engage with the public, get the public's input, business community, residents, everyone. That's part of this process, not just us up at the dais.
But we did that with the downtown specific plan, but the ink is not even dry on that thing. I think it's still on the printer. I mean, we just.
I would think even with that downtown plan, nothing stops a developer from bringing forth an idea through a development agreement where we could talk about and look at parking and impacts and have a conversation. When you're talking about the general plan, it is a general plan where we're saying R1, R3, light industrial, commercial office, right? High level. This is where things go, and this is why our community works the way it does and why it works so well. There's always going to be exceptions for projects that may or may not come up, and we always have our public works, and we have means and methods to deal with one-off developments as they come through development agreements. That's not going to change.
This is, though, policy shaping for the future. That's what we're doing right now. The question is, from a policy standpoint, do we want to attract greater density downtown, yes or no? It's not, we have this constraint that you have to work within, and then, by the way, you got to go through this extensive development agreement process, which, by the way, is money at risk.
Sure.
A developer puts that money at risk not knowing whether or not they're going to get approved. So this is our opportunity to say, what do we want downtown? Not what do we have?
From
Right, but
Mayor Pimentel's point, I do think I feel like we just did that. Like, it was one of the last things that I sat through as a planning commissioner, and we spent quite a bit of time and had a couple of study sessions, and we did increase density, maybe not to the point, what the world will look like in 2050, but we approved development footprints that actually have no density limitations. It's a height limitation, it's a FAR limitation, but it's not a unit count limitation. I
want to go back a little bit to what Laura was explaining and that Councilmember Boyles was alluding to as well, explaining momentarily ago. It's more policy. That we're really going to end up focusing on policy direction. We're not going to be talking about the actual density that may be adopted or implemented through the zoning code, which would be a later amendment. It's really about talking a little bit more in abstract about what are the desired goals about downtown. If the downtown specific plan didn't accomplish it, or if it's achieving better, housing jobs balance downtown, or attracting a particular housing type, senior housing or affordable housing or whatever it might be, it's about establishing those policies and goals through the land use element that we can tackle through the zoning code, or in this case, it would require an amendment to the downtown specific plan if there was some other policy that we want to build upon what we just spent the last 2 years doing with the downtown specific plan. So a good example of that is we adopted, along with the downtown specific plan, we adopted the affordable housing strategic plan. That in of itself had a specific goal to look at creating or at least incentivizing the production of a housing type that attracts a younger workforce in the downtown. That's just it's a goal that the affordable housing strategic plan set. We got to figure out how to do that, and is that an amendment to the specific plan? Is it some other incentive program? But it's just a goal. And so similarly, this would be establishing goals that we'd like to pursue in this case, in any of these focus areas.
Well, and in particular, the general plan is not going to set height limits.
Right.
It is required to set density limits and intensity limits, floor area ratio limits for all of the land use categories, but it's not going to say how tall buildings are or how far they have to be set back or what specific uses are allowed in each of these land use categories. It is broader than that. And the reason is it wants to provide that flexibility over time for different councils to interpret what that means.
I'm going to say that thematically, to get away from the downtown, thematically, I think flexibility is probably one of the great lessons learned from the evolution of downtown, or Smoky Hollow, excuse me. 2018, it was going to be creative office with some light manufacturing, and then we realized we had to be able to delineate between what's R&D and what's manufacturing, just because of the changing characteristic of what manufacturing looks like and in smaller package units. So I think as we look to establish sort of goals and focuses, I think a greater amount of discretion in the planning department is something or community development is something that I would be in favor of, just because us trying to chase technology has proven a fool's errand over the last 5 years.
Just a clarification, Mayor, when you say greater discretion, you mean more flexibility?
Yeah, what constitutes a conditional use, right, is one of the biggest challenges we had. We had companies leaving because they were interpreting our code as manufacturing, and we were seeing them, they were somewhere between manufacturing and R&D, and that probably accounts for 40% of our units in Smoky Hollow. So that degree of flexibility without them having to wait a year for a study and then the city council to make a code change is something that would be, I think, pretty useful. Although it's not my area of expertise, so I'll defer to that side of the table.
Just broader definitions for particular zoning.
Well, the policy would be, policies that are drafted in such a way to allow the market to dictate best uses and maybe not list what you can do, but the things we maybe don't want you to do, right? That way it's more inclusive and we're just saying you can't do explosives or fireworks or anything dangerous, but as far as tech and R&D, knock yourself out.
That's great direction.
A little more specific too is that we know, we already have an example in Smoky Hollow of a great project that I would call flex. It would be industrial and commercial on the same footprint. Industrial for 2 floors, office above. We don't really have any examples of that, but we know that that product is in high demand, and we don't have any of it besides one building. So a way to, typically we'd say if you do industrial, you're precluded from doing commercial or vice versa. We need to have the ability to be flexible enough to say you can do both on the same. You can do, worst case scenario, foundry, and above you could do office as an extreme example. But we need to, our builders in town need that in the region.
Yeah, that's like the Radiant example. It took us a while to figure out how to do the sort of open office with prototyping and this.
And so that type of policy, I mean, yes, we were talking about just Smoky Hollow, but that's something that would apply to everything east of PCH.
I think broadening the corporate office uses would allow for more innovation and more companies, and yeah, I think that's one of the lessons we learned from Smoky Hollow.
Yeah.
And Smoky Hollow, not just east.
Right.
And the other one that I would like to see, I don't know how my colleagues feel, is more density of employees here on Main Street. We know already there's demand. So we have startups working right on Main Street in former dance studios, et cetera. They want to be next to retail. They want to be walking distance to bars. Smoky Hollow has some of that. East of PCH has very little of that. It's very desirable here. We know that already with our real estate and economic development. So we need to have, I think, a greater density of employees here downtown. There's a parking component, I realize that, but car share is going to be more and more prevalent in the future.
Okay.
I don't want to get too in the weeds because I think that's where we'll naturally will go if you let us. But I know we only have 15 minutes left, and because it's such a big demand drive, I brought this up with planning. Is it appropriate to talk about data centers at this level because they just take so much, huge opportunity cost that they absorb for it, but huge power components. And are we? I don't know. Should we do it at a later date? I mean, they're good and bad in a number of ways.
I'd say that we might be learning more by getting into some of these weeds at the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
Than some of the high-level
But,
feedback.
however,
so you see
We only have 15 minutes, and so
Mayor, one way to address that, though, from a policy standpoint, is the types of business that you want to attract are ones that have high employment density and revenue generating. A data center does neither.
Not
would
necessarily
disagree with
disagree on the
that.
UUT.
No,
Yeah,
UUT
yeah.
is
The
huge.
UUT is a small package, hyperscale, 50 megawatts. That's probably about $3.5 million a UUT.
Okay.
I mean, that's significant get. There's an opportunity cost because there's a few employees, and we probably have to plant a substation somewhere to do it. But those are things that we have some spent land that maybe that's the right spot for it. I don't know, but I would just say, maybe the question is, are we open to those? Are we at that level? Like, are we open to it? Is there such thing as a mixed-use data center? Can you do 2 floors of data center and 1 floor of, yeah, well,
I think we're also hearing just dealing with the impacts of those uses and being able to either monetize or capture what we need to tackle the impacts on those types of uses. It's not just data centers, but in general, maybe those types of uses, we have to look at the balance of being able to capture and recoup the impacts that they might have.
So in this, we would give guidance that if we're going to consider a use like that we want to make sure we have a balance of foot traffic and revenue and those things?
Right.
Okay.
And I think when we talk about east of PCH, how this comes up is, we talk a lot about housing as an amenity for employment, but something that's come up is also other amenities for employment, like walkability and retail. And so, yes, we want to drive that on Main Street, but I would like to see a higher confluence of that east of PCH as well. And obviously, if we have data centers everywhere, then that kind of works against that. So picking and choosing where we do that, but just make sure that we are, to the extent possible, amenitizing east of PCH as well for our employee base with revenue generating retail, entertainment type uses.
Yeah, the 1 to 900 blocks north on Douglas are just completely amenity starved. I mean, completely amenity starved.
And again, that could be addressed by opening up the uses, not having to do a permit to have a coffee shop or a bodega, you know, or a dry cleaner. Like, those all need to be looked at. Before we end, you asked about the housing overlays. I don't think we ever answered. Did you have a question about that?
Yeah, the housing overlays exist today, and it's fuzzier, I think, than strict land use policy that says we are looking to allow greater densities in these areas. It's more like, in the future, we think it would be okay if we had to have higher density, that this would be where it would be. Should we continue to look at these areas with an eye on the land use element being much more specific with
Well,
regard to?
that's under our deal with the state, right? That's the negotiation we went through to get those housing overlays. And when you talk about other potential areas in the future, we need to have those for the future. Because the state is not going to stop what the state has been doing, which is taking away local control. So that these conversations don't really mean much when the state passes a law and mandates that we build X here or we do this density. So I think what was done in the housing element was done very intentionally with a lot of thought. And so if we don't need to kind of blur those two things, we probably best not. Because we're going to be starting our next 10-year cycle within the next year or so. And nobody knows what the state's going to be demanding our city change or update or modify. And so we have an approved housing element now. We've got the processes in place to implement that, and it includes the overlays that we've already discussed. So are you saying we should like move that forward, or what is it you're trying to do?
Just take for lack of a better word, a harder line on it and say the city is committed to having greater density in these areas over the long term, not just if we need it for our next housing element cycle, but is our policy direction to recognize this is a good place for housing, to meet demand for housing.
If I can add a little bit additional color to that, when staff works with HCD, frequently what they look at is that engagement from a public level as well as with the policymakers, that we have vetted these locations or these geographic areas that we've already identified, had the conversations, that when and if we have to adopt higher densities, these are the locations, we've studied them, we've analyzed them, we're comfortable with locating it here. That's part of their criteria when they evaluate it. So we had half that conversation in 2021 when we were going through the cycle with HCD. We'll have to have the second half of the conversation the next cycle because of the areas that are outlined in the orangish hue. Those are not formally adopted yet. Those were sold to HCD. That this is the first half of the conversation. We did not formally adopt it, but what would likely be helpful in that next conversation is if at least we lay the groundwork that we're still comfortable with this, and this is what we're committed to, and this is how we've proven that we're committed to it, that it's in the housing element, that it's in our land use element. We're still not changing the zoning or anything of that nature, but it is demonstrating that commitment to say we've got a game plan in place, and we know that it'll work. We will have demonstrated projects like Pacific Coast Commons or the project just north of that. We'll already have some of those projects to demonstrate that we know that this works. And so it's sort of, we're at a fork in the road. Do we make that commitment through this land use element, or do we wait till the next housing element cycle?
I'm going to say we wait. Okay. And when we started talking about that housing element, and I asked the consultant at that time, how come there are no overlays east of PCH? And it was because there are no amenities. There are no parks, there are no schools. It's not a residential neighborhood, and the state doesn't want us pushing, you know, low income on one side and R1 in the middle. So we are constrained, not just by the 5 miles, but by the 1 mile of residential of where everybody wants to live. So these housing overlays have been studied, they have been looked at, and so I think that process that we have is a good one that works.
Are you comfortable,
Can
Councilmember,
I
with
ask,
that?
what does staff recommend? You do this for a living.
Well, yeah, that's a hard question. Is that we only go through land use elements once every 20, 25 years. If you happen to be in the city during that time that it happens. This is the third land use element that I've been fortunate enough to go through. and every community is very different in how it tackles these issues. For example, before I was here, I was in Culver City, and we were in the midst of wrapping up the comprehensive general plan update, inclusive of the housing element, the circulation, everything. But if you follow their policy and the direction that they've taken, it's very different than I think that the tact that we're taking. And so every community is very different. And I would suggest that there is some relatability between the housing element and our land use element. It makes that conversation with HCD easier, but it's really about how much do we create that interrelation between the two. They do have to be consistent with one another, but I think it's important to acknowledge what the housing element establishes. As to go as far as rezoning things, maybe that's where we draw the line. To your point, that's a card that we need to hold.
And that's fine, but I think it's also, I mean, all these things these are already R3
Yes.
that we've got in here. So if we want to hold off on formally making a declaration, I mean, sounds reasonable to me, but it's not asking anything new of us.
The question we have is, do we have the reins provided by the council to ask those questions to the community in reaction to the input that we've had is we need more housing in El Segundo? The question is, back to the community, is where? And these are some of the areas that have had preliminary buy-off through the housing element. Can we further that conversation? Do you say they're already zoned R3? Is there an R4 in the future? And that's part of the conversation, not looking at just what your regulatory environment is today, but should this plan through 2050 plan for something of greater density and make that policy commitment? And that this is the type of guidance we need for what questions can we ask, because Councilmember Giroux said, you know, we need to know what things are not to be discussed because there's no policy option there, and what are those things that have some flexibility that we can talk to the public about.
Can we all agree that we need more senior housing based on demographic trends?
Let me finish this though. So I understand this part. You're asking if you can ask people if they're comfortable with multifamily housing in places that there's already multifamily housing, but also there might be more if we were to go to an R4 with a basically taller building. I mean, we already looked at that one on Washington and had to go to like 60 feet to make it pencil out.
Because the housing overlays are at a much higher density than R3 already. So I just don't think I'm fully understanding the question.
So, some of the feedback that has been relatively universal is that there is a need for housing, whether it's from a standpoint of affordability to just the housing unit mix type and, family friendly versus studio, just the diversity in housing stock. So what we've heard rather universally is that there is this need for housing types to solve a handful of different problems throughout the community. If we're going to try and solve that, where do we put them? We already have this game plan in place through the housing element with areas that we talked about, higher density, which would be 65 to 75 units to the acre in the overlays, the R3 overlay and the mixed use overlay on PCH, which is twice what today's density is in the R3 otherwise. The R3 density is at 30 units to the acre today. We've already talked about for the rest of the overlays, a density of 65 units to the acre in the R3 areas. When we did that, we went through the study with John Kaliski. We developed development standards in order to accommodate that type of density and still maintain the characteristics of the neighborhood that we wanted to preserve in building massing, architectural design, aesthetics, and those things of that nature, as well as reduced setbacks in order to accommodate the 10-pound bag in a 5-pound, or 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, essentially. So part of our ask now is if we do have to find places where we increase density, where do we focus? Where's our response?
Well, you said that, and what type?
And what type?
Because we don't have any small footprint studios in town, or very few. We don't have senior housing outside of one property. So it's not just how much, but also the type, right? That's what we're,
Yeah.
through policy
Yeah.
shaping, okay.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is, again, that we went through that exercise because those are the best places for it. So I would like to see us focus on providing housing in the spaces that we've already identified as, you know, as our priority before moving on to another area.
I agree.
Okay, I think that's consensus. That's three at least. Maybe it's not consensus on the right. It's enough to get us to the next slide in 90 seconds. 80 seconds.
Next steps. We will be coming up with land use alternatives to take to the public for discussion. And it's not just saying, here's what the options are, it's what are the implications of making this choice, so that people can't just say, yeah, that'd be a great place for housing, or housing at this density, or yes, we'd like to rethink the corporate office centers. What could they be? There needs to be an understanding from the public of what might that mean in terms of tax revenue generation, impacts on public services. So people can be making reasoned choices, not just looking at colors on a map and choosing one over another. And so that's what we're going to be doing over the next several months. And then come back to the Planning Commission and Council for that discussion based on, and share what we've heard with the communities to get to a preferred land use plan to write the element around. And we can include at that time, I'm hearing clearly from the council, as much detail as possible on that. So let's get off this high level. We want to get down to here pretty darn quickly.
Well, not so much detail, just El Segundo specific, right? Information that relates to exactly what this town is, how it works, and how that change will change what the town is. Like a general statement, everyone's going to say, yeah, we want robust environmental protections. We want great parks.
But how does that occur? And
How
what does
that
it mean
happen here?
exactly for El
What does that mean
Segundo?
for us? Yeah.
From a policy, from things that we can actually effectualize.
Yeah. Michael, I'm thinking the council's going to want to see some of that, the policy earlier rather than later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
Perfect, right on time. We are adjourned to closed session.
Actually, you need to open the regular meeting.
What's that?
You need to open the regular.